Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Larimer. I am the editor-in-chief of Poets and Writers magazine, and I am just thrilled to be joining you here and now for a celebration of our 8th annual 5 over 50 debut authors. We publish this feature every year in our November-December issue, and it has very quickly become a favorite of mine. And judging from the turnout this evening, I can see I am not alone. Thank you so much for joining us to honor and celebrate this year's 5 debut authors. So I absolutely love what 5 over 50 represents. Not only 5 notable first books of poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction, but also 5 independent and university presses that brought them to life. And of course, 5 debut authors who are shining examples of the rewards of patience and resilience, of commitment, determination, and hard work, of what can be achieved after many years, decades even, of writing while also pursuing careers, in some cases raising families, and otherwise living a full life with all of its challenges, rewards, loves, losses, obligations, and inspirations. They took their time, either by choice or by necessity. These are 5 debut authors ranging in age from early 50s to early 70s, who prove that that very word debut, as well as its companion new, is not synonymous with young, no matter how loosely that qualifier is defined. So these authors help prove it's never too late. Now, before I introduce our 5 over 50 for 2023, a few housekeeping notes. Please keep yourselves muted so that we can keep the focus on our debut authors. All of you are automatically muted on the way into this room, so there's no need to do anything further. If you'd like to pose a question for the Q&A portion of this evening's program, by all means, type your question in the chat, and I will try to get to as many of those as possible a little bit later. If you haven't already done so, please consider picking up a copy of Poets and Writers magazine, subscribe if you can, or otherwise support Poets and Writers so we can continue bringing these kinds of features and events to you. You can find the 5 over 50 feature on our website at pw.org, along with so many other author profiles and interviews, reports on the publishing industry, essays about the writing life, and a bunch of free databases of writing contests, literary magazines, small presses, literary agents, and on and on and on. 99% of it is free, so please do check it out. And please also, this one's important, please consider visiting Bookshop to purchase the debut books by our featured authors. We put together a page on Bookshop. The link is in the chat, and it makes it very easy to go on and buy all 5 of these wonderful debuts. Makes a good holiday gift. So again, the links for both the feature and our Bookshop page for this evening's programs are in the chat. We are recording this event, so you can also look for a video of it in the coming weeks at pw.org and send it to your friends who were unable to make it here this evening. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce this year's 5 over 50. Alma García, whose first novel, All That Rises, was published in October by the University of Arizona Press. Dean Watson, whose first book, the memoir Transplant, was released in October by Washington Writers Publishing House. Tommy Archuleta, whose first book of poems, Susto, was published in April by the Center for Literary Publishing. Chin Sun Lee, whose first novel, Upcountry, was released by Unnamed Press in November. And last, but certainly not least, Donna Spruijt-Metz, whose first book of poems, General Release from the Beginning of the World, was published by Parlor Press this past January. Thanks to all 5 of you for joining us this evening, and congratulations on the publication of your debut books. We're just thrilled to have you here. Okay, now we get to enjoy a short reading by each of the debut authors. But first, just one more reminder to type your question for any or all of our authors in the chat, and we will try to get to them a little bit later in the program. Also, please consider purchasing their books from Bookshop. A link to that page is in the chat. But first, a reminder to mute yourself if you haven't already. And also, let's hear directly from our 5 over 50. Okay. Our first author is Alma García, whose debut, All That Rises, is a novel exploring the entanglement of 2 neighboring families in El Paso, Texas, revealing unexpected alliances and the permeability of presumably fixed boundaries as the cast of characters search for where they belong in the confluence of history, border politics, their homes, and the outside world. Alma's award-winning short fiction has appeared in Narrative Magazine and most recently in Phoebe and the anthology Puro Chicanics Writers of the 21st Century. She is a past recipient of a fellowship from the Rona Jaffe Foundation. Originally from El Paso and later from Albuquerque, she now lives in Seattle, where she teaches fiction writing at Hugo House and is a manuscript consultant. Welcome, Alma.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you, everyone. Well, you have a general idea of what's going on in this book, and so I'd like to introduce you to one of the main characters. There are 2 neighboring families who become entangled with each other, one Anglo, one Mexican American, and so here's one of them, one of our primary characters whose life has been disrupted in an unexpected way. In the bronze light of late afternoon, as Jerry Gonzalez stands at the French doors overlooking his deck, Chavela gives her orders. The coffee table, she says. Make sure you use 2 tablespoons of wax, just 2, only 2, top to bottom, never in circles. It's an antique. Sí, señora, is the response. Jerry glides to the landing at the top of the stairs and peeks over. The heavy-set woman whom Chavela addresses stands with her back to him in the kitchen, her black bun drooping, the waistband of her pants bunching beneath her t-shirt. She shifts between feet in breadloaf-sized athletic shoes. Chavela with her pixie cut, her pink blouse, her pantsuit, the color of ashes. También las ventanas, por favor, she adds, tapping the bottle of Windex on the kitchen island. The woman nods, for she is the maid. The maid. There's no way in hell he's addressing this woman as "tú." Dad, calls a voice behind him. Can I take one of the cars? Adam, their son, pokes his head in from the bedroom. Black attire as ever, orange stripes in his hair, eyebrow with ring inserted without permission, and which he is required to remove in the presence of his grandmother. Where? Adam shrugs. He has developed a theory that matriculated seniors shouldn't have to explain everything. He is focused mostly on packing things into duct tape boxes in anticipation of the day his parents will drive the 700 miles to San Diego to deposit him at a dormitory's doorstep. God forbid he should attend El Paso's serviceable university, where it so happens his father recently achieved tenure. But Adam desires new experiences and opportunities. He wants to see more of the world. Of course, Jerry has encouraged this curiosity. Of course, both he and Chavela want only what's best for him. Although, if this were completely true, Chavela wouldn't have spent the past 2 weekends angrily cleaning out the garage. Take the Volvo, Jerry says now. Return by midnight. Adam grins. Thanks, viejo. He disappears. Jerry returns to his desk, his embossed tomes, Sons of Oñate, Modern Colonialism in the American Southwest. From downstairs comes a surprised female gasp, followed by the yapping of a small dog. He oozes back out of the room. Chavela's Pomeranian dances on its hind legs. Ay, Paquito. Chavela stoops down and tickles him under the chin. She extracts a dog biscuit. Her voice rises an octave. Who's my good boy? Are you my good boy? Yes, you are. And the biscuit is snapped up in midair. She looks up from the floor. ¿Te gustan los perros? The maid is practically standing with one foot on top of the other. Sí, señora. The coffee table, Chavela says, top to bottom, not in circles, never. It's streaks. It's an antique. And by the way, there's a sandwich in the refrigerator for you. Muy bien, señora. Gracias. Chavela makes her gathering sounds, papers, keys, sunglasses. Señor Gonzalez is upstairs, she says. He'll be home for the summer, researching, writing. In any case, he knows you're here. She pauses as though to let this information sink in. And I myself will be back in a few hours. Goodbye. Jerry cracks open Sons of Oñate. He whaps it shut. He descends through a rising aroma of pine sol into the kitchen, where he comes upon the maid herself, a dowdy vision in rubber gloves and 70s-era headphones from which are emanating the sounds of a soccer game at tremendous volume. She stands at the sink with her back to him, filling a bucket with hot water. Welcome back, booms the announcer, to the mid-season game of the Primera División, and it's shaping up to be the biggest game yet of 2005. Chivas have the ball. He watches coolly as she moves the bucket to the floor and scrubs the sink. Foul on Bautista. Monarcas get the penalty kick. Chivas take possession at midfield. Medina passes to Avila. Avila to Aguayo. But no, Chivas recapture. And Vermeulen, the Belgian, takes the ball. He's closing in. He shoots. See. She chants at the ceiling. Gol! Pede poste. She hisses through her teeth. Lleva. Buenas tardes, he calls out. She startles and whirls around to face him. Ay, perdón. She shuts off her headphones and removes them, blushing. Buenas tardes, señor. He forces a smile. Usted se llama Lourdes, no? Her dark complexion models as she nods at the window over the sink. Does she think he's making fun of her by speaking to her as an equal? He has no idea. He removes a casserole dish of macaroni and cheese from the refrigerator and inserts it into the microwave, then snatches up the remote from the kitchen island. The TV squawks to life in the den. The news is nattering on again about the fence, every bit of disconnected chain link and barbed wire along the border converted into a 700-mile wall of concrete and steel. Brownsville to San Diego, in theory. Also, the war in Iraq, some new mid-occupation iteration of the United States invading somebody, bombing somebody, installing somebody, evading somebody. He zaps the TV off. Remind me of how often we'll be seeing you, Lourdes? Twice a month, senor. The microwave beeps. She mops. Well, he says. He locates a Diet Coke and fills a glass with ice. Have fun.
Oh, thank you, Alma. That was great. Thank you. Okay. Our second author is Dean Watson, whose first book is Transplant, a memoir about becoming and overcoming, about one woman's resilient journey in fighting kidney disease, braiding together the underbelly of the American healthcare system with a story of love and family. Dean started her career in the social policy field and has written on a variety of policy issues, including youth development and community building, for major foundations, nonprofits, and the Washington Post. She has served on the board of directors of many civic and arts organizations, including the Painted Bride Art Center and Scribe Video Center in Philadelphia, and the DC Rape Crisis Center and Day 8 Arts in Washington, DC. Over the past 10 years, she's focused significant attention on writing poetry and completing a memoir about her experience with kidney disease, dialysis, and kidney transplantation. She lives in Washington, DC with her husband, the journalist Joe Davidson. Welcome, Dean. Oh, I think you're muted still.
Yeah, here I am.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to read from the first chapter of my book. As Kevin said, it's a book about my experience with kidney disease. So I'm going to read a little bit about the way I grew up and the impact it had on how I handled my disease. I grew up in a Black, poor to working middle-class neighborhood in South Philadelphia, just blocks away from the 7th Ward area, where W.E.B. Du Bois did his landmark 1899 sociological study, The Philadelphia Negro. We were the Hayes clan, well known and respected in the neighborhood as people who didn't bother anyone if no one bothered them. For much of his adult life, Daddy worked on construction sites as a mason tender. That is, an on-site assistant to the stonemason who helped organize tools, transport materials, and keep the job site clean. My father was a highly intelligent man who later in life told me how much he hated that job and how disrespectfully he was treated by white coworkers. I'm fortunate I didn't kill someone on that job, he admitted. But Daddy got up between 4 and 5 every morning and went to work to support his family. In the early 1970s, when my father was in his 40s, he got a job as a business agent for Laborers Local 332, and later proudly served as the local's vice president. Mommy was a homemaker until my little brother Jerry was old enough for school. Then she worked first as a kindergarten aide and later as a clerk typist for the Philadelphia School District. Grandma Daisy dipped ice cream on weekdays in the basement of John Wanamaker's department store. However, to supplement her income, she also ran a speakeasy out of her home on the weekends, selling booze and chicken or fish dinners and renting rooms to customers who got lucky or were just too drunk to go home. With few exceptions, we and the neighbors we lived among were hardworking people. We loved each other, fought each other, and looked out for each other. At the same time, despite our closeness in proximity and emotion, everyone did what they could to keep their personal business to themselves. In our world, people came and went, babies were born and died, folks coupled and broke up, and fortunes rose and fell without much open discussion of the circumstances. Ain't nobody's business was the unspoken and, when necessary, spoken mantra. My father, Bernard, often told us, what happens in this house stays here. There would be hell to pay if he ever heard that one of us put family business in the street. Of course, there was always gossip, but engaging in too much idle pratter could be dangerous to your well-being. My Aunt Betty once punched a neighbor, Miss Louise, in the face and sent her to the hospital for gossiping about some nefarious activity she'd seen going on in my aunt's house. She should have stayed out of my business was the only reason Aunt Betty ever gave for the assault. When I think back on the people I grew up with, their attitudes about others poking around in their private affairs make sense to me. Most in my family and community didn't have much more than their pride, and they wanted to keep it. Life was hard enough without everyone knowing your ups and downs, offering their 2 cents about how you ought to live your life, or even worse, using this information to make you feel lower than you already did. This philosophy and way of life, which molded me as a child, influenced the way I lived my life as an adult and faced my disease. You'd better know how to take care of yourself was another tenet I heard early and often. My father took good care of us as children, but when I came home pregnant at 19 years old, he made it clear that I had to find another place to live. Bringing shame on the family wasn't an option. If you want to act grown, he told me, you need to get out of my house. A few weeks later, I did. Likewise, once I understood that I needed to fight for my health, I knew that the fight was up to me and no one else.
Wow. Thanks so much, Dean. Thank you for sharing your story. Okay, our third author is Tommy Archuleta, whose first book is Susto, a collection of poems hailing from the desert mountains and spanning such topics as loss and death, motherhood, survival, and remedios remedies, both rooted and surreal. Tommy is a mental health and substance abuse counselor for the New Mexico Corrections Department. His work has appeared in the New England Review, the Laurel Review, Lilly Poetry Review, the Cortland Review, Guest House, and the Academy of American Poets Poem-a-Day series. A native of Santa Fe, New Mexico, he lives with his family on the Cochiti Reservation. Tommy, it's wonderful to see you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Really honored to be a part of this wonderful series, the Poets and Writers, and to join such a wonderful company. Congratulations to all of you and your books, and let's hope that that we get them out there. And thanks everybody for tuning in and zooming in. Just real quick, Susto, the title, is it has two definitions that I was thinking about as this work surfaced. One of them is in Latinx, in many Latinx cultures, Susto is essentially means fright or shock, and probably it looks a lot more like trauma, especially when we look at it through the lens of mental health diagnoses. And when I was studying my counseling for graduate work, I found in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the 5th edition, that they started to incorporate culture-based conditions. And in there, they were talking about Susto as being the separation of soul from the body as a result of a traumatic event. And that seemed to encapsulate what happened to me when my mother passed in August of 13. So this work is stems from that experience and from those definitions. I keep asking, but nothing comes back. When the words, please forgive me, come flying out of my mouth. Is it because everything you do is written down before you do it? My love for the smell of wet dog, for instance, and that I once, no, twice, stole father's bone-white pocket knife. And who really took the picture of me naked in the mayor's bean field? And who exactly found mother's musty wedding gown and wore it for 3 whole days after they gave her tiny body back to the earth? That day, by far the darkest and longest of all. I swear, floaters everywhere, up and down the gorge. My boots wet, wet. My horse, who knows where. Hopefully home, waiting for the moon to show. But still nothing as to how my wings got so blued and broken. So many others here too. Most you can feel. Most you can wait. It must be noon. The hour father stops hoping they find me and starts praying for twice more suffering. I never know if it's dawn or dusk when root hunting this far down the canyon's mouth, or which world I'll end up entering when surfacing, the one mothered by fire, the one of numbers posing as letters, or the one whose ground is made of clouds, voices, and parts of dark short songs that are really one long dark song, each and every note nowhere near as holy. So curanderismo features in this book. I know Alma knows well about curanderismo and probably many in our audience, but in my culture, this part of the country, I was raised with it. It's basically the use of medicinal herbs to treat any number of ailments. And so these remedies show up as poles in the work, and this is one. Remedio, recuperación. Build a white fire in thanks once the spirit has returned to the body. Give the patient hot tea to drink, composed of chamomile, linden, and passion flowers. Present the eldest member of the family with red cedar shavings to be burned at noon the following day. Make a small bundle of all remaining herbs used for the recapture of the soul. Instruct the patient to carry the bundle for 6 days and nights. On the morning of the 7th day, join the patient in burying the bundle in the family field or garden. Finally, the apple mother stole from Eve. How many plagues and winters have you seen? How many wars have come and gone with no victor for you to grieve? And how many fires christened, alms burned, vows written, only to be sung half-heartedly come Christmas? Please then, mouth the word harvest with me. Thanks, you guys.
Wow, thanks so much, Tommy. That was an incredibly moving reading. Okay, our next author is Chin Sun Lee, whose debut is Upcountry, a Northern Gothic novel following the converging lives of three women with varying socioeconomic statuses and religious beliefs, who become bound together in a whirlpool of suspicion, animosity, gossip, and a local drowning. After a long career in fashion design, Chin Sun earned an MFA in creative writing at the New School in New York, and in 2014 left fashion to commit herself fully to her writing. Her work has appeared in Electric Literature, Literary Hub, the Georgia Review, The Rumpus, and Joyland, among other publications. She's the recipient of writing fellowships from the Hambidge Center, Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, Brush Creek Foundation for the Arts, and the Playa Artist Residency. She's also participated in the Blood Jet and Lady Fest reading series in New Orleans, the Franklin Park Earshot and Renegade reading series in Brooklyn, and the inaugural River Views Art Space event in Lynchburg. She lives in New Orleans and is at work on her second novel. Welcome, Chin Sun.
Thank you, Kevin. And it's also great to see all your faces and names. I'm just going to read a section around the middle of my novel, and all you need to know is that my protagonist, Claire, has separated from her husband shortly after they bought a house in the Catskills. Claire was sorting through the mail that had just arrived when her heart skipped, seeing Sebastian's handwriting on a small gray envelope. She tore it open to find a brief note. Hi, Claire. Hope you're well. Lars forwarded your Christmas card. Thank you for that. I meant to send one back, but missed the window, so here's to another year bygone and all good wishes for the next one. I'm in Albuquerque now, teaching at UNM, and will be here through at least the summer. After that, we'll see. It's been an adjustment, but it's nice to have some stability and make a little income. Anyway, just wanted to let you know you can reach me at this address if you need to. All my best, S. The return address was a P.O. box number. The note was written on plain but expensive paper, the envelope handmade with his signature deep flap. Receiving it felt bittersweet. His notes to her in the past, though rare, were treasured. Beautiful cards for special occasions he made from thick matte vellum. She wondered why he decided to communicate with her this way instead of through an email or text. Was it that he preferred the distance, the impossibility of an immediate reply? Or was there something more sentimental about his choice, though the tone of his note was anything but? She'd sent him a card out of impulse and curiosity, as she hadn't heard from him since the summer. Her message was brief, an olive branch, with no mention of past discord or current troubles. That he responded at all, she supposed, was validating, except that it put her back into a spiral of confusion, overanalyzing every sentence he wrote for possible clues about his intentions. With all her health issues, work challenges, and constant negotiations with her insurance provider, there were days when she never even thought of him. But in other moments, when she felt physically exhausted or sat in the chemo ward getting her infusion, or when the house was dark and too quiet, sometimes she ached for him. Those moments of weakness filled her with shame. She resented his ambivalence, the power it wielded. Why couldn't he just ask for a divorce and be done with it? Why couldn't she? That night, she had trouble sleeping, even after taking a Xanax. She'd be on the verge, then float back up to consciousness, too tired to read, but unable to turn off her mind. It had begun to sleet outside, and she lay with her eyes closed, listening to the wind and drizzle tapping her window. It was a soothing sound, but after 20 minutes, she still couldn't sleep. Fuck, she said out loud, pushing her duvet aside. She reached for her robe as her feet felt around the floor for her slippers. She still had half a case of red wine in the pantry. What harm would one glass do her? Snow reflecting the full moon gave enough illumination so she didn't have to turn on any lights, which would have jarred her out of drowsiness. But the house was chilly, and she padded down the stairs quickly. As she crossed the kitchen to the pantry, she heard a swishing sound from the backyard and, turning, saw something glide past the French doors. She walked up to the paned glass to peer out. The sleet was now turning to snow, sheets of it drifting sideways across her yard as the wind gained force. Then her breath caught. There, by the maple tree, stood two figures in long gowns, their backs turned toward her. Something about them was familiar, but also a little off. They seemed not quite solid, almost phosphorescent, and their gowns didn't move despite the wind. Her heart beat faster. She was wide awake now, sleep a foregone loss. Is this real? She whispered. Either answer, yes or no, would be troubling, but she would prefer not to be losing her mind. It's the chemo, she told herself. She'd read it sometimes caused delusions. In that moment, another gust blew up drifts of snow, and when it settled, both the women were gone. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chin-san. That was wonderful. Okay, our final author is Donna Spruijt-Metz, author of General Release from the Beginning of the World, a book of poetry that gives voice to the silence, lies, and secrets surrounding a father's suicide and speaks directly to and with that which is holy, showing the tender and relentless ripples of grief that lead to healing. Donna is a poet, translator, and emeritus professor of psychology at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. Her first career was as a professional flautist, which we simply must hear more about later. She lived in the Netherlands for 22 years and translates Dutch poetry. Her poetry and translations appear in Copper Nickel, Rhino, and Inflectionist Review, Poetry Northwest, and elsewhere. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you. And thank you so much for putting this together and for having me. And congratulations to all the people who read before me. What beautiful readings. I am buying all the books that I didn't already have. I am indeed going to read to you from my debut collection. I like the art. It's my husband's. And it's a general release from the beginning of the world. And it is, as Kevin said, there's a lot of family-facing, sort of suicide-heavy poems. I'm not going to read those tonight. I'm going to read more the holy facing. And I'm going to read you two poems. One is from the book, and I'll tell you about the next one when I read it. So this first one is called Doppler Effect. What does it mean to turn? Turn inwards, turn away, turn tail. Turn the wood on a lathe, make it beautiful. Turn as a stone or a shell in the darkened seas until smooth. Return, turn back to what you thought you left behind. Come back, smoother now, chastised by your own salt, a bit braver. This is what I mean about time, the false sweep of it, the imagined flow, what I remember, what I forget. The small kindnesses when you come close, oh, even that can't push it down for long. Turn the pain over and over until, like a pearl, it grows luminescent and regular. And this too is what I mean about time, how it stops here, how we cast a circle and you split me open and something passes through, or I pass through something. As the siren passes through the night, everyone's emergency, eager to stop time, to turn back, just for a moment, without turning to salt, thirsty for water from the rock. What I want is to feel the world without pulling back, to be able to stretch out my hand. And the second poem I'm going to read you was in the November Poem-a-Day from Academy of American Poets. So I just had to bring that up because it was really exciting. And this is called Hoof, like an animal's hoof. And it's after Psalm 89, lines 26 through 35. Hoof. Is it that I've had a richness of choices? Have I gazelled sideways from one river stone to the next? Or has it been a series of false starts, the hoof withdrawn at the slightest snow? January's wolf moon calls her pups into the night, marks their necessary kill. We all need to eat. Even now, in snow, hoof paused over the water. My heart says trust. My tracks say doubt. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you to all 5 amazing debut authors and readers. It's such a treat to have you all together so we can hear directly from you, such a range of subjects and aesthetics and journeys to get to this point in your lives and your careers, which we want to talk a little bit about. While we all get on screen and settle in, I also want to take this opportunity to answer what is a common question we get around this time of year, which is, how can I be considered for next year's 5 over 50? So it's very simple. If you are 50 or older and your first full-length book is scheduled for publication by a small press or university press or a commercial publisher in 2024, please send us an email at editor@pw.org with all of the information, the title of your book, who's publishing it, and when, and really that's all you need to do. In preparation for each annual feature, we look at dozens of titles and choose 5 sometime in late August, but they don't have to be published before August. Anytime in 2024 is a-okay. And so just let us know if your first book is coming out in 2024. Editor@pw.org, and I'm pretty sure that's in the chat as well. So I have a few questions for all 5 of you that I hope will spur some conversation about your distinct paths and journeys to publication. But before I start, I just want to say again to our audience, please do pop those questions in the chat and we'll try to get to them shortly. First, I wonder if I could ask this first question just to sort of get things going. I asked a version of this to our 5 over 50 last year. And I think it gets at something that's pretty interesting, I hope. The question is, do you think that publishing your debut when you did had more to do with internal or external forces? So in other words, was it a result of like a period of rejections or just not finding the right agent or editor or publisher until relatively recently? Or did it have more to do with kind of your own internal clock? Did it simply take this amount of time to start writing or to continue writing or to hit the right idea for this book to become a reality when it did? So that's the question, sort of internal or kind of external forces that led to this timing. Dean. Oh, you're muted.
I think it was a little bit of both for me, but I would say mostly internal. I think a series of life events just made me make more what I consider practical choices in my life. I was a parent young. I had to get myself educated. I was a single parent. And then I got a disease where I had to take care of my health. So I really had to wait, I think, until I felt like I could take some time to really reflect on what else I wanted to do, what I wanted to say, and even feel like I had something to say. And by the time I wrote Transplant, I felt like I had been through enough to have something important to say. But it did take some time for my life to kind of stabilize, for me to have that space where I could focus in on something. And then I had I had some very good material by the time I decided that I was ready to write the book.
Thanks, Dean.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else want to?
Sure, I'll take it on.
Jump on in, sure. Yeah.
I've been writing all of my life, on and off, but just never took it seriously, just took it with me into music and into the academy and psychology and medicine and the whole 9 yards. Wanted to be a rabbi. And And then finally, I think it was basically a drunken night with friends of ours who were in the Otis writing department, who ran the writing program. And I think my husband said that I wrote poetry, and they talked me into going. So that's how that started. It's almost cocktail time now too.
Alma, I think that you had your hand up.
Well, you know, they say that life is what happens when you're making other plans. I'm definitely not new to writing, and that's what I've done all my life too. And you know, if you read the Poets and Writers essay, well, maybe this detail didn't make it in, but this book had its origin in the first published short story I ever had, which came out 23 years ago. And that, so the path was winding and it went in many directions, but it did originally become a collection of linked short stories on which strength I got my agent, who's my agent to this day, and who said, yeah, you know, once he had it in his hands, this really needs to be a novel. And he was right. I knew he was right. So I started over. And this was after, you know, about 7 years of work. And it takes a while to write a novel. It takes a while to write a very long sort of epic scale novel, which is what I was writing. And, you know, once we had this, you know, it went out and it didn't get a response. And it went out a second time and it didn't get a response. Each time massive revisions took place. Meanwhile, you know, I too went through parenthood and cross-country moves, all the things that will slow you down in life. I did manage to you know, I was always publishing short pieces, but it really took this final try to find it was in the right form at the right time in the right hands finally. But it's also true that I couldn't have written this novel until I wrote this novel.
Yeah.
Three times. It was ready when it was ready, and I couldn't have written it in many ways. As you know, let's not pretend that it wasn't frustrating. But without my life experiences, I couldn't have fed the novel the knowledge it needed. And we're not always in control of our own paths. To an extent we are, you know, we have to make the effort, but it's also ready when it's ready. And I have plans to not take quite so long this next time.
Excellent. Tommy, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the responses and the diversity. So I'm going to be the minority opinion and talk about external factors, because I don't know anything about the fiction world in this country, but the poetry world is really, it's pretty much a small ecosystem. And it is a very supportive ecosystem. And it is largely due and strengthened by relationships. I'm not going to speak to luck because I don't really understand luck, but I do understand devoted teachers and instructors who stand behind the work of those that have the discipline that's required to be able to guide the talent. Because and I was raised in an environment where there was really no lack of talent in any program that I was involved in. What there was a lack of was discipline. And I think that getting published, even if it's a piece in a journal, whether it's a top tier journal or whatever, I think it really just gives us permission to continue, because what we do is it's very isolated work, and much of our work just sort of exists in the land of the Word document, and maybe for good reason, most of it should. But it does take a lot of discipline and I think risk, but there were people that were shopping this manuscript without my even knowing it because I had submitted it. And Kazim Ali was one of them. And I did not even know who this person was. And all of a sudden, there's an email in my inbox from this person. And I turned to my mentor, Dane 11, and I'm like, do you know? Because you know how it is with emails, right? I mean, like, there's just crazy stuff out there. And I looked up this guy and like, you know, I'm like, oh my God, like, who is this person? So this person selflessly and quietly was championing Susto's manuscript. And so again, I don't know anything about luck, but I do know something about embracing what it means to do this deal. I don't really see the rejections as rejections. I see them as opportunities that people are reading my work and it's getting seen. And I've taken to thanking when I get a so-called rejection. I take a moment to thank them for giving my work attention, and for the work that their journals are doing. And so, you know, I think it's how we roll, really. I think there's so much work that we do off the page that doesn't get looked at.
Great. Thanks, Tommy. That's a really great perspective on rejection, for sure.
Mhm.
Healthy. Chin Sun.
Yeah, I will just speak to the fact that, like Alma, for me, it was a bit of both internal and external in terms of how long it took me. I didn't start writing until I was 40, but I wanted to much earlier, and I had actually taken a fiction course about a decade earlier, and had a very discouraging, kind of bitter teacher, not just towards me, but throughout for the whole class. So it was kind of an interesting thing where, you know, at that time I was much less confident about my skills. I was just exploring. And so to have someone be discouraging is a truly awful thing to do if you're going to be a teacher. But you know, luckily, I decided there was something about writing that still just really, you know, persisted as an ambition and a desire for me. And then, you know, in my case, I had to just leave my previous industry completely in order to focus on writing. And I know that that's not even possible for a lot of people. So I was really privileged to be in that position, you know. But then once it took me about 3.5 years to write my novel, the external then part of, you know, the delays then kicked in because getting an agent didn't take that long, but the submission process was about like a little bit over 2 years. And I think that's when my age, frankly, and just experience did help me to persevere, because it's very difficult, you know, to get rejections. And Tommy, like the way that you see that is really lovely, you know, as it even if no one actually takes it, it's being seen. But it can be challenging. So I do feel that in that way, being a little bit older has helped me.
Great. Thank you. Chin Sun, I want to get to that agent question, and I want to ask that to Alma as well, because I know both of you found agents, and that there's a number of comments in the chat about wanting to know a little bit more about that. So I want to get to that, but I want to return to something that you said, Dean, in terms of, you know, you were mentioning all of this experience that you had through, you know, living a life and, you know, the ups and the downs, and something you said about like, okay, I have enough now. I can write this book, you know, and it's time for me after all of that experience. And it just reminds me of something else I've kind of heard through this 5 over 50 series, which is, you know, this notion of as you get older, you perhaps feel like you need permission less to do what you want to do, and to write the book you want to write. And I'm just wondering if that kind of resonates with anyone here.
Well, I mean, I certainly I'm not needed. I
Nope.
certainly feel like I don't need anybody's permission to do just about anything anymore.
Right.
What else do I have to do to prove that I'm fully human and incapable of living the life that I want to live as far as I can? And I think I'm going to say something that might go to another question that I saw you wanted to talk about, and that is that I wouldn't change anything that I've gone through to get to this point. I mean, I don't even know if it's possible. Well, it's not now, but I mean, I just don't know if I would, because every lesson has really helped me become, a better writer and even probably a better person. So I'm here for all of it.
Excellent. Anyone else? Yeah, Donna.
I couldn't have written the book that I wrote now when I was younger because the material was just too hard for me.
Mhm.
So I needed permission from myself. And I think that also comes as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm indeed still sensitive to, slights and rejections sometimes, absolutely. But it doesn't knock me for a loop the way that it would have done had I been younger. But mostly the permission from myself to write the hard stuff. That took longer than I'd hoped.
That sort of leads me to another thing that I wanted to ask, which is, has there actually been anything that's gotten easier about the whole writing life? Like as time goes on, I'd like to sort of focus on a little bit of the positives too. Okay, it took a while, but was there anything that sort of got easier as you went on? I mean, the rejection sounds like, obviously rejection is hard, but anything that's gotten easier? Yes.
The writing in some way, I don't know if easier is the word, but I can recognize my progress more. I can recognize a lot faster, having written so much now, over several years. I have more confidence in being able to ascertain, is this good? Is it not? Does it need work? Does it need revision? And especially in terms of getting feedback. As a young writer, or rather a new writer, I was a lot more unsure, of how to receive criticism or even how to critique my own work. And now you grow in confidence. You just do, the muscle becomes stronger, and I just feel a lot more confident in my ability to assess my own work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree that that confidence really builds over time. I think the practice of writing has really helped my discipline. I know now when I sit down at the computer to write, even if it's not fabulous the first time, I know that it will be better. I mean, that it's just, I had to develop that discipline of sitting down, and the more I write, the better, and easier it gets.
Alma, yeah.
Well, I'll say that on a practical level, it's a lot easier to write with teenagers than with toddlers in the house. But and then I can only imagine what the next 10 years will be like, and how that will continue to evolve. But it's true, you do this long enough and you begin to know when you've hit something, and yet you are more comfortable with less certainty. You know, I you know, like everyone else, the more experience that you become, the more you recognize when you're onto something. And sometimes that thing is still intangible, still inchoate, but you can sense the energy of it. And it's getting comfort with that discomfort of following that scent until you see where it leads, because you know, writing is one part intellect and one part instinct. And I think you have to get a lot more comfortable with following the instinct, even within the structure of developing a writing practice, of being able to be comfortable with like, yeah, this is so crappy. All right, next thing, let's keep going. We don't care. It just has to be, it doesn't have to be good. It just has to be done. And that's one thing that I've really learned, that the only way around it is through it.
Yeah.
Through it. And just in the end, really you learn so much. You'll learn so much about your own writing and about how to perceive your own writing by having to talk about someone else's writing, by having to meaningfully critique a peer or student, or someone you haven't even met, but you're just examining their book. All of it amounts to just developing a greater tolerance for less certainty and less perfection, and trusting in the process while you do it.
Thanks, Alma. That's great. So I'm wondering if, now that your books are out, right? Has the experience of publishing them kind of replenished the well of inspiration for you? Do you find that you're like invigorated after what was perhaps a longer wait than you expected, but or is the feeling more like relief? Like, how do you feel now about the next chapter, right?
Mhm.
Donna?
Neither of those.
Okay.
When this book first when the book got taken, it didn't take that long. I was so grateful, and my press is wonderful. Free Verse Editions, Palette Press. But so there was that feeling of joy, just of validation in a way too. But boy, when it came out, it was like, oh no, people are going to be reading this.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to know things about me. And I found that a little intimidating. I found it really intimidating to stand in front of people and read these really personal poems. And after that, I sort of loved it. I thought, whoa, I love this. And then, so it took a while for the inspiration to sort of click back in, because I was just so busy with the process of it being there. But now it's on high alert again. So it's, I think, more cyclical for me.
Great, thank you. Chin-sun.
So, it took me about 2.5 years for my book to find a publisher. And I remember when the first editor expressed interest, I was so shocked. I actually felt nauseous. So that was my first response. And then there was relief. But to be honest, now I feel so invigorated. It took a long time, longer than I ever expected. But I do not feel at all like, oh, this is the culmination, of all my ambitions. It's absolutely the beginning for me, So yeah, super excited.
Dean.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just ready to go. Right now, I'm sort of bogged down with lots of readings and entering the book and this and that. But I really, I can't wait. I've got ideas for 2 more books in my mind, one poetry and one short stories. Once I understood that people actually wanted to read and hear what I had written, I just can't wait to get back to working on another project.
Oh, good. That's good to hear, Dean.
Mm.
Great. Excellent. Tommy.
I just wanted to share something real quick. I think it speaks to that wonderful question, Kevin, but I was at AWP in Seattle, And as traumatic as that was, I only went to really one workshop, and I had to leave because it was so packed. We exceeded the fire code. But the woman that spoke had just, I forget what her name was, but she had just won the Flannery O'Connor Award. And she said, if you don't take anything away from you today, take this, that your first book is not what you're promoting your writing. And then we were quickly like had to leave and escorted out. But I think I went to Seattle to hear those few words.
Mm.
And so I've actually taken those words to heart. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that answered your question, but I have to answer that phone.
No problem. Thanks, Tommy. Okay, so I sort of teased it a little earlier, but Alma and Chin Sun, I would like to just give you a second to talk a little bit about the agent search, because I know that there's a number of writers who are very interested in that topic. So can you just sort of, maybe briefly give us a rundown of how that happened for both of you?
Sure. First of all, if you are in the process of querying, I highly recommend subscribing to the Publishers Marketplace database, because it's about $25 a month, but it's worthwhile. You get access to all the information, agents that you're interested in, who their clients are, and vice versa. It will show you the latest deals, so you could see what the marketplace, holds. So on a, just pragmatic tip level, I just think it's necessary. But my experience in terms of both finding an agent and then finding a publisher, and I wrote this in the essay for Poets and Writers, it really is about just sticking it out, because you just need that one person to say yes. You really do. When I was querying, it was about 2018. So this is pre-pandemic, which I've heard was easier. It's a little bit harder now because, first of all, the backlog from, the repercussions of the pandemic, and it's just a very competitive field. Really don't just throw things against the wall and hope, you're going to find an agent. You have to do the research. You have to find out what agents represent books that are similar to your book, and see, who else they represent, so that your query letter is professional and it's informed. They will notice, if you're someone who's targeting them versus just sort of randomly sending stuff out, and just, persevere, because it's a really good sign if you get full manuscript requests, but if you're not, then you just wait and maybe take a moment and reevaluate, is your manuscript really ready, And as I think I mentioned, it took me about 8 months to find my agent. And I was grateful, that it wasn't longer.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Alma?
Well, Chin-san, I'm so glad that you shared all of that practical information, which is absolutely, yes, the gold standard of approaching an agent. And, I often advise people in my work as a manuscript consultant about the agenting process and the querying process. And I advise all the same things, including the fact that if there's someone whose work you really love, go to their first book, or whose work speaks to your work, go to the first book. They are almost always going to be thanking their agent in their first book. But that said, with all this practical information, which you should absolutely take as gold, I had a fairy tale story. I did, and it's atypical, and it was like lightning striking, and I don't know how often it can happen to people. I was approached by my agent after I had published a few stories in some prominent places, and one of his other clients had read my story and said, you need to take a look at her work. And he contacted me, and I didn't know what to do with it at this point. I was asked, do you have a book? I said, yes, I'll have a book in about a month. Well, that was that, that first book I mentioned. That was what we had. But thus began the beginning of a very long and very fruitful relationship. Some people, who my agent has never divorced me during this entire process, because he believed in my work, because the kind of work I'm doing is the kind of work that he specializes in and represents. And but what neither of us knew was how long that he would have to wait, that we both would have to wait. And so getting the right agent, and not just any agent that will give you the time of day, is also extremely important. And it's really important to gauge how serious they are about you. And you'll get that sense from them. You'll get that sense of like, okay, they just want you to churn a book out, and if you're not going to be ready fast enough, they're done with you and they're moving on to the next thing, or are they invested in your career? And that's what I got. That was, even though I had this fairy tale beginning, and it was incredibly fortunate, there's no way I could have gotten across the finish line without that relationship, and without the door. So many doors had to be knocked on and had to be opened, but I couldn't have opened most of them myself. And so that's another way things can happen, but you can't count on it. But I can tell you, learn from the example of finding the right one.
Very good advice. Thank you, Alma. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that the Poets and Writers website does have a database of literary agents that's free to browse, and there's suggestions and tips from the agents, links obviously to their websites, and also lists of other authors that they represent, which is a really good way to see if maybe they would be interested in your work, if other authors that they represent are similar to what you're up to. So let's expand it out just a little bit with the last few minutes that we have here. Any other sort of suggestions beyond agents? Any other suggestions or tips that the five of you might have, just whether it's practical or inspirational, or could be about writing practice, could be about how to find a literary magazine, or anything like that? Any kind of tips that you have for our audience?
I would suggest trying small presses, paying attention to small presses, because I believe that's the only reason that I was able to get my book published. I tried agents and they all said, we won't be able to make any money off of. I can't convince a publisher that they will be able to make money off of your book. You're not a medical person, that go back and interview doctors, that kind of thing, because I was writing about disease. But I entered a contest of a small press and I won. And I think it was, they were interested in what the subject matter was, but more they liked my voice. They identified with who I was. Mm-hmm. And they were interested in having and in publishing me. So I think, and I don't know that would have happened otherwise.
Right. Good. Chin-san.
Yeah, absolutely. I love small presses. My publisher is a small press. I would just say also build your literary community. That is so important. I think it's more important even than, these degrees, getting an MFA, it's not necessary. I enjoyed my MFA experience. But frankly, the reason I enjoy it the most is because going through graduate school, I was able to meet other writers, and other writers, they just lift you, so whether it's through conferences or an MFA program, or just going to readings in your community and connecting with other writers. If you can go to a residency, wonderful, but however way you've just got to find them. It's so important. It's frankly as important as perfecting your craft, because so much of the opportunities that have come to me, have often been sideways. It's just, oh, this person that I met at a residency, and it's not even necessarily publishing, oriented. It's like I've gotten jobs this way, freelance positions, editing gigs, the more people it's vital. And because it's such a hard, it can be sometimes really challenging, profession, you need people, other writers who understand what you're going through, to support you and to lift you up and motivate you, and then you commiserate likewise. So yeah.
Okay, I want to get to Tommy, but Donna, I think you had something about community perhaps that you wanted to.
I want to second that. As a poet, community is everything. It's so important. Find the people that speak to you as writers and poets. Through conferences, I think I made most of the community that I now have, I met in my many years at Breadloaf. Right. And your teachers, as Tommy said, are your teachers forever, even if it's only in a workshop that you clicked in. Right. So find your community, have help, let them read your work. Yeah. And then you get to read theirs, and you learn so much about, where should I submit, or what do you think about this poem, or right. Community is everything.
Thanks, Donna. It's a big part of what Poets and Writers tries to offer writers. There's a lot of resources on the website. The Directory of Poets and Writers is one of them, and also Poets and Writers Groups, which is a platform to create and join writers groups. That's on the site now in beta form, and we are working very hard on a 2.0 version, and look for that in the new year. But Tommy, you had your hand up. I'd like to get to you.
Yeah, I just, as honored and humbled as I am, like to my core, for Susto to be out in the world. I've been writing for a long time. I've been writing poems since I was 10. And so I just want to put in a plug for, does writing increase the quality of your life? I mean, I think we really underscore, not only in this country, but in art in general. I mean, for centuries, what's applauded is what's seen and what gets an audience. But, the world is big enough for people to have different reasons to keep writing. And some of us don't have a choice in the matter, apparently. I don't know about anybody here, but I feel like crap when I don't write every day. It's like when I skip yoga or meditation, it's not good. I'm not present for my family or my life. And writing connects something with humanity, with the world, with my father who's 90, with my dog. It does something for me that, and I that's my question, is maybe look at your motive for what you're doing, and ask yourself that tough question, and it'll change. Your response will move, because writing it's a movable feast. So it's okay that you don't get published, is what I'm saying. It's okay. It's fine. It's okay to not know what the hell you're writing. If nobody's told you that today, I'll tell you that. It's okay not to know, and it's okay to keep going, because it makes you feel good and it brings you joy.
Thank you, Tommy. Yes, absolutely. I love that you make that point, because while 5 over 50, is about the publication of a book, this is not a transactional thing that we do here. It's writing as a way of life, as you so wonderfully put it. And thank you for saying that. Definitely. I feel like we could just keep talking for another couple of hours, but we are over time here. I want to say one more thing, and I would be remiss if I didn't say this, but I just want to acknowledge our features editor, India Elena Gonzalez, who is a debut poet herself. Foxwoman Get Out was published this past year by Boa Editions in their Blessing the Boat series. India put a lot of work into putting this feature together, and I just want to acknowledge her here. So thank you, India. And everyone at Poets and Writers, of course, for helping out and making all of this possible. But thank you to our 5 over 50. I'm so happy that you were here together, and thank you for your readings. They were beautiful, and thanks for sharing your perspective and your wisdom here with all of us. So thank you very much. And everyone, again, if you have a first book coming out in 2024, please let us know about it. editor@pw.org. And thanks so much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Kevin, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
I'm buying all the books.
Yes, bookshop.org. Yes.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.